Tucker Carlson recently had Ted Cruz on his podcast to talk about not just the Israel-Hamas war, but his general stance on war. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I am not a fan with Tucker Carlson's position on war. Tucker Carlson's position is basically that if you can't do war without collateral damage and civilian casualties, you shouldn't do it, and it's evil.
Potentially millions more people die.
It's no defense of Imperial Japan or Pearl Harbor or Franklin Roosevelt for allowing Pearl Harbor, which he did. It's not a defense of any of that to say if you're intentionally killing civilians, you probably shouldn't beat your chest and brag about it. Maybe you could make.
I agree with that.
Maybe you make the case that we had to do it or whatever, but you should.
I agree.
You should weep, and that's evil, and you should just say it's evil. And I know it's really threatening to.
Is it evil, though?
Ben Shapiro to say that or whatever, but
is it evil
to kill civilians on purpose? Yeah, it is. I think it is.
Really?
Kids and children. Well, how is it not actually?
In a war?
Well, you can call it whatever you want. How is it right to kill women and children?
I didn't say, because I think there is a moral right behind you if you are literally...
To kill women and children?
If there's a world war that threatens if it threatens the entire world, yes.
Some people killed your kids, like your 8-year-old? Like,
well, how is that
morally justifiable?
Well, because actually you have to, by your criteria...
It's disgusting.
Okay, it's nothing...
So Tucker Carlson's position here is that war is bad because it kills people. Now... I do agree that war is something to be avoided. I also do think that war is bad as well. But if diplomatic solutions fails, war is the backstop. War is actually, the threat of war is one of the things that can push people towards coming to the negotiating table, because without the threat of war, people can be like, oh, I'm just gonna walk away. I'm not gonna play ball with you guys. I'm gonna take my stick and go home, and I'm gonna keep on doing whatever it is that you didn't want me to do, whether it's building nukes to attack somebody or I don't know, like enslaving our entire population, taking all the Muslims and massacring them and selling them for parts like China does with the Uyghurs. Look up the Uyghurs in China. That's a whole situation. And we're not forcing them to say, hey, stop doing that for some reason. I don't know why we think that China systematically taking up all of the Uyghur Muslims, shaving off all of their hair, killing them, and then selling their organs, basically literally taking all the Muslims and selling them for parts, is more justifiable than Nazi Germany. I don't understand why people view China in that way and sort of turn a blind eye to what they're doing over there. But all of that regardless, if there is a nation that is like, we want to blow up the whole world, let's say, for example, it's justifiable to go against that nation and be like, hey, you want to blow up the whole world? We're going to take you out before you develop nuclear capabilities that would be at the point where you actually could destroy the whole world. Or let's say that there's one nation threatening to take out 5 other nations. It's justifiable to go to war with that nation as well. That's actually one of the things with Nazi Germany, where Nazi Germany was doing was wrong, of course, but people didn't want to go to war with them until they started trying to expand their borders, because it's like, well, hold on, you are threatening the sovereignty of other nations to impose your will upon them when democratically that's not what they want to do. That's wrong. And so, like, when one nation tries to attack another nation, of course it's fair to engage in war with them. That's why I'm not mad at Iran firing back at Israel when Israel fired weapons at Iran. But also, I do completely understand at the same time Israel firing on Iran. They shouldn't have, but I understand it, because it seems like Iran is developing nuclear weapons. There's no proof of it, but it seems like that's what's happening. And it's been very clear over the past several years, even multiple decades, that Iran wants to destroy Israel. They've literally talked about toppling Tel Aviv and Haifa. Destroying Israel is something that they want to do. They fund terrorist organizations that commit terrorist attacks against Israel. They've actually funded Hamas, which committed the October 7th terrorist attack. With forces like this, it's completely fair to go to war with them. Tucker Carlson's position is that war is bad under any circumstances and it should not be done, and it is evil, which I disagree with. So here we have Tucker Carlson, the ultimate war is bad. I don't want to say shill or grifter, but that's his position that he keeps on trying to shove down people's throats. And we have Ted Cruz here, which is very strongly pro-Israel because he's an American politician. I wonder how much AIPAC money he gets. But let's Wait, hold on. Let's just not throw accusations out here. How much AIPAC money does Ted Cruz get? Because I want to get my facts straight. I don't even know if he does. Does Ted Cruz get AIPAC money? I mean, he's not Lindsey Graham, so he might not get AIPAC money. Okay, so according to Open Secrets, Ted Cruz has gotten almost $2 million from AIPAC. I think this is AIPAC, right? Probably AIPAC. It says money for pro-Israel to U.S. senators. This money comes from employees or PACs affiliated with the industry, not from the companies themselves. So probably AIPAC. But yeah, he gets special interest funds from Israeli sources. So, that might play a role as well. I mean, hey, if I was being paid to do a certain job, I don't think I'd badmouth the people paying me. So
you've come out for regime change in Iran as distinct just from taking.
By the way, I do want to clarify, I think that regime change is actually almost worse than war. It's the basis for wars. It's like you're messing with other people's democratic processes. You're trying to overthrow, many times, what those other foreign countries have decided to do democratically, destroying their democracy or manipulating it in some way, at the very least. I think that's wrong. I oppose regime change in the way that Tucker Carlson opposes war. Let's put it that way.
So you've come out for regime change in Iran as distinct just from taking out the nuclear sites. What does regime change look like in Iran?
Somebody else in charge.
How do you get there?
Look, that ultimately has to be a popular uprising from the people. And it's not a complicated question.
Now, the thing is, you can manufacture that with regime change. He's clearly supported that. So, that's not even like a big revelation there.
Is America better off with a country that has a leader who hates us and wants to kill us, or to have a country with a leader who likes us and wants to be friends with us? And
definitely the latter's better.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so that's not a complicated statement. Look, I believe you look across the world when you have countries that have dictators that are viciously anti-America. Venezuela, Maduro hates us. Would we be better off with Maduro out of power? Absolutely. I want our enemies out of power, and I want our friends in power.
I could not agree more. The question is, how do you get there?
Of course.
We've been trying to kill Maduro for quite some time. We have troops there, as you know.
I don't know that we've been trying to kill Maduro.
We have. Huh. And I think you know that. And
I don't know that.
Okay, well, that's a statement of fact we have. So
why is he trying to give like these like slide digs to Ted Cruz? It almost sounds like he's trying to get under his skin here.
We do have massive sanctions. We tried to pressure him out of office.
Yeah,
I'm
there's all kinds
not
of
aware
stuff.
of efforts.
I'm just saying there's a lot of pressure coming from various parts of the U.S. government on that government, and it's still there.
Yeah.
Same, the country of your ancestors, Cuba. 1959. We've been working on that. Hasn't worked. So it's. I think we both agree it's hard to do.
It absolutely is hard. And look, I think you're reasonable to ask, how do we produce that? And I think there's a distinction between what your objective is and the means to get it. There are all sorts of things I would say we would be better off. We'd be better off in China without Xi there. Should we invade China and topple Xi? Of course not.
We'd be better off with no national debt.
There are lots of things.
Totally.
But it's good to say, all right, what are our objectives?
Right.
And so with the Ayatollah in Iran, saying you're for regime change, I don't view as complicated. I mean, the guy literally leads mobs chanting death to America. So that's not good.
Definitely not good. But the reason I think it's important to get a little more detailed about how that might happen is because there's military action in progress, which we're supporting. And the president has said clearly, including last night, that he is focused on eliminating the capacity of the Iranian government to produce nuclear weapons. You are saying we need to use military force to effect regime change.
I have not said that.
Oh, I must have.
No, I have not said that once. Okay. I don't think we need to use military force to do regime change. I said I support it. I would like to see it happen. You asked me how should it happen? A popular uprising. What I've advocated for. All right, let's step back a second.
So basically, it's like he would support anti-Iranian terrorists going in and toppling the government. But he would not support America doing that. Now, I don't know if he would support America funding other people to do that in the same way that Iran funds terrorist groups to attack Israel. Be an interesting question to ask him. I wonder if Tucker Carlson poses it to him here.
You and I, we've known each other a long time. I would say we agree on about 80% of the things on Earth.
For sure.
And there are a lot of things, and we can get into the nitty-gritty of foreign policy as much as you want. There are a lot of things on which you and I agree, not just a little bit, but violently.
I totally agree. I was rooting for you in your last campaign, for sure.
Well, thank you. Look, you have been heroic on the border. You've been one of the clearest and best voices in.
I just want to point out, it's very, very clear that Ted Cruz is buttering up Tucker Carlson here. So I wonder what this take is going to be. Because you don't say all of these things if you're not going to say something that's about to piss the other person at the person at the other side of the table off. So really curious to hear what this take is going to be.
In the whole country on securing the border and on the absolute crisis we're facing. And in Texas, I see it and live it every day. In COVID, in fact, you may recall in the middle of the COVID lockdown, I was out walking my dog when the whole world was shut down and we were living in lunatic times. And I called you and said, Tucker, your nightly monologues are the single best thing on television. Like I watch them like an injection of crack. Okay, I'm mixing my metaphor because you don't inject crack, but you get what I'm saying. No, I mean, you were standing up and speaking like, what the hell are we doing, in a way that we desperately, desperately needed. And so whether it's securing the border, whether it's the insanity of COVID lockdowns and the vaccine mandates, whether it is the Second Amendment or the First Amendment, you and I agree on a ton of stuff. The 20% where we disagree, I do think is meaningful. And it's mostly in the foreign policy space. And what I would say, if you'll allow me to get a little theoretical, and then I'm happy to get specific.
Yes.
For a long time, people have perceived two different poles of Republican foreign policy. There have been interventionists, and those have been people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham, George W. Bush.
I oppose that.
And there have been isolationists. And the most prominent of those have been Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and there are others. And people...
I suppose I oppose isolationism as well, but I think it's a lot more of a sympathetic position. I think it's a stronger moral position to have. You know, the problem with interventionism is sometimes is what you might end up being is like the only person left in the entire world, the only nation left in the entire world that's on your side. And that's the problem with interventionism, right? It's because you can wake up 10 years down the line of interventionist, of an isolationist policy and find you have no allies left. And then there's suddenly a shotgun pointed at your back. And you're like, whoa, what the heck happened here? Well, you don't know because you were sleeping like a bear in your cave for 10 years. You know, you weren't paying attention to what was going on in the world outside. So isolation is not the move, but it's a lot better than intervention, where you're basically going in and disrupting and colonizing and taking over other countries. Like that's also not right. It's good to have lines of communication with other countries, form allies, give allies things, you know, that they want, that they need. They ask you for something, if it's reasonable to give it to them, provide them with that thing. Now, I think that you don't just do that to get friends. You use that for leverage. So if you want a country to do a specific thing, let's say there's a country where there's 5% of their domestic policy that you disagree with. Like, let's say we're looking at Germany. I'm like, hey, guys, I think you should loosen up and have a little bit more democracy, maybe have more free speech in your country, get rid of some of these hate speech laws, and maybe we'll give you oil like a 15% discount or something. What's it called? It's called internationalism. Internationalism is what it's called. I want to say, where it's you cooperate with foreign nations, you help them, you give them stuff, and you're not going to attack them if you disagree with what they have to, what they do or whatever. But you're also not just hiding from the entire world. Internationalism in politics. Internationalism is a political principle that advocates greater political or economic cooperation between states and nations. It is associated with other political movements and ideologies, but can also reflect a doctrine, belief system, or movement in itself. Supporters of internationalism are known are known as internationalists and generally believe that humans should unite across national, political, cultural, racial, or class boundaries to advance their common interests, or that governments should cooperate because their mutual long-term interests are of greater importance than their short-term disputes. Internationalism has several interpretations and meanings, but is usually characterized by opposition to ultranationalism and isolationism, support for international institutions such as the United Nations and a cosmopolitan outlook that promotes and respects other cultures and customs. The term is similar to, but distinct from, good, because it's not the same, globalism and cosmopolitanism. I'm not familiar with cosmopolitanism. I'll have to read that on Wikipedia after the stream.
Perceive, those are the two choices. You got to be one or the other. I've always thought both were wrong. I don't agree with either one. The way I view my own foreign policy...
I'm with you, by the way, for whatever it's worth. I agree with you.
Okay, good.
I don't know who set up that binary, but there are lots of choices, actually.
I mean, people sort of naturally fall into... I think they want to classify people, and they're like, okay, you're one or the other, and you got to be all or nothing. And the interventionists, it seems, have never seen a country they didn't want to invade, and that doesn't make any sense to me. And the isolationists, I think, don't take the threats to America seriously. And I think that's naive, and it doesn't work. And so my view, I consider myself a third point on the triangle. And what I describe that as is that I am a non-interventionist hawk, which sounds a little weird, but what do I mean by that? I mean the central touch point for U.S. foreign policy and for any question of military intervention should be the vital national security interest of the United States. How does this make America safer? How does this protect Americans? If it does, we should be strong. And actually, another way of conceiving what I'm saying...
Berlin in the chat says, gang, I'm 14, but I'm watching politics stuff, LOL. That's great. Part of me is like, how am I not boring you to death with this? But also, I remember that, like, when I was your age, I was listening to, like, 9 hours of talk radio a day. So, you know, I can't be pointing fingers here.
Should be the vital national security interest of the United States. How does this make America safer? How does this protect Americans? If it does, we should be strong. And actually, another way of conceiving what I'm saying, I'm speaking theoretically, but Reagan referred to it as peace through strength. And actually, I think Donald Trump's foreign policy is very much what I'm describing, a non-interventionist hawk, where he understands that, and I think this is historically true, the best way to avoid war is being strong. That weakness and isolationism, I think, encourages war. So going back to...
Because you're not negotiating at all. And so, you know, you could suddenly wake up and fight an enemy. Or you might be in a situation where you have to communicate with another nation, and you're just on such polar opposites, or you don't even know how to negotiate at that point. Where it's like, well, we know how to do one thing, we know how to shoot a gun, you know. So that causes big problems.
Regime change, where you started in Iran.
So, just to make, I don't think I disagree with anything you've said. So we may not be that far apart, really, because you said that the single criterion for making decisions about America's foreign policy is America's national interest.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. Which is also America first. That's another way of putting that as well. I
think it's the definition of it. Yeah. The question is, are we watching that now?
We're sorry to say it, but this is not a very safe country. Walk through Oakland or
Wow,
Philadelphia.
this studio must have changed a lot since he made that ad.
So
does he even
most
shoot
people,
out of
they think
that
about this, want to
studio
carry
still?
a firearm, and a lot of us do. The problem
Looks
is there
like
could be
he's
massive
broadcasting on the set of
consequences for
Yellowstone.
that.
Okay,
At
here.
yours today, Berna.com.
So I think we are. And from what you've said publicly, I think on Iran in particular, you and I disagree. And all right, let me contrast it when Obama was president. When Obama was president, you remember he talked about wanting to have military action against Syria. And at the time, I tried to keep an open mind to it. I said, okay, let me listen to the commander-in-chief, describe to me how this is in America's interest and what your plan is. And Bashar Assad was a bad guy. He was killing his own citizens, and he had chemical weapons that were very dangerous. I could conceive of a commander-in-chief laying out a plan for, okay, we're going to go in and say, grab the chemical weapons and leave. Like, I could see that if there was a real threat to America and there was a plan to prevent that, I could see supporting that. So I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I listened both in classified briefings and public questioning. And number one, their public defense of it was incoherent. So John Kerry said, we're going to engage in an unbelievably small strike. I think that's a quote. I'm like, okay, and to do what? At the time, there were 9 major rebel Islamic groups in Syria. I'm like, okay, I agree, Bashar Assad's a bad guy. You topple him. And one of the 9 other groups takes over. 7 of them were affiliated with radical Islamic terrorism. You had Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra. I'm like, wait, how is it better to have lunatics who hate us in charge? Assad's a bad guy, but I don't want worse guys in charge. Obama administration couldn't give an answer to that. And ultimately, when you press them, John Kerry in particular, I pressed, and he would say, well, we need to defend international norms. What the hell's an international norm? I don't know what it is, but I'm not interested in putting U.S. servicemen and women in harm's way to defend one.
Amen.
So I opposed the Syria attack and opposed it vocally. And it was interesting. Rand and I agreed. Rand's a friend of mine. But we agreed with that position for different reasons. What I was asking is I think the question we should ask, how does this make America safer? The Obama administration couldn't give me an answer, so I opposed it. I think Iran is very different.
Let me ask what you think of how Syria wound up, because Bashar al-Assad now lives in Moscow.
Yeah.
He was taken out by our allies, and he's been replaced by a radical Islamist who was affiliated with ISIS. So is that a win or no?
Unclear. Look, Syria's a mess, so I've consistently opposed.
But we had a secular leader in a religious and ethnically diverse country. Now we have a religious extremist, Islamic religious extremist, who's overseeing the purge of Christians and Alawites. Is that better? That doesn't seem like a win.
One of the things you said is you said he was taken out by our allies. I don't think that's right. Israel didn't take Assad out. What happened, and I'll tell you.
What about Turkey?
Turkey didn't take him out. So it was interesting. I had a long...
How did Assad get kicked out?
Yeah. When Netanyahu was in D.C. a couple of months ago, he and I sat down for a couple of hours. He's a good friend of mine.
I'm not sure if this answers the question. One thing that's kind of annoying is Ted Cruz is answering these questions in a bit of a roundabout way.
And we talked actually about Syria. He made an interesting point that I've not heard anywhere else, in that he said he believes what toppled Assad was when Israel took out Nasrallah. Nasrallah was the head of Hezbollah, and they took him out. And he made an interesting point. He said it's fascinating how a charismatic leader, and Bibi said, look, Nasrallah was a very effective terrorist leader. And when they took him out, that power base was supporting Assad. And that ultimately, in Bibi's analysis, removed the support from Assad and toppled him. But they weren't trying to take out Assad. My view now, I don't know.
So you don't think that, and I don't, it is very confusing, and I don't know that anyone really knows all the details, but you don't think that Israel or Turkey, our NATO ally Turkey, played any role in toppling Assad?
I don't know. I don't know that they did.
Interesting.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel.
Tucker, the title says Tucker leads Ted Cruz struggling to respond on his push for regime change in Iran. I'm really surprised that Ted Cruz couldn't provide straightforward answers. He didn't really straightforwardly answer some of the questions. Now, maybe in the full interview, he does get to the full answer, and I don't have the time to react to the full interview here. I don't support regime change, so I think I'm a bit of more of an interventionist than Ted Cruz. And if you're going to push Ted Cruz, he's probably going to say, yeah, I support America funding regime change, which is like, to me, it's like, no, that is like anti-democratic to do. We should not be doing that.